I never thought surviving a heart surgery would make my own family look at me like a problem that needed to be managed. Not loved. Not protected. Managed. The first time I heard the word burden, it wasn't shouted. It wasn't said in anger. It was said casually, like a fact everyone had already accepted. My name is James Miller. I'm 67 years old. Before you see what happens next in my life story, subscribe to this channel. And if you've ever felt pushed aside by your own family after giving them everything, comment your city or country below. I want to know I'm not alone. For most of my life, I was the strong one. The dependable one. The man everyone leaned on. I worked for over 4 decades as an electrical supervisor in Ohio. Long days. Night shifts. Emergency calls during snowstorms when power lines went down. I missed school plays, birthdays, even a couple of anniversaries. Not because I didn't care, but because putting food on the table always came first. My wife, Linda, used to say, "One day, James, it'll slow down." I believed her. By 60, the house was paid off. Emily, my daughter, had her degree and a stable job. Mark, my son, was married with kids of his own. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. That's when my body decided to collect its debt. It started with a pressure in my chest one cold Tuesday morning. Not sharp pain, more like someone sitting on me. I told myself it was heartburn. Men my age are professionals at denial. By afternoon, my left arm felt numb. By evening, I collapsed on the kitchen floor. I remember Linda crying. I remember Emily screaming into her phone for an ambulance. I remember Mark standing near the doorway, pale, frozen, annoyed that something inconvenient was happening. The hospital lights were blinding. Voices rushed past me. A doctor leaned close and said words that changed everything. "Major heart attack. We need to operate immediately. Open heart surgery. 6 hours on an operating table. 6 hours where my life was reduced to numbers on a monitor. When I woke up, I felt like a truck had driven straight through my chest and parked there. Tubes everywhere. A machine breathing for me. Linda's face swollen from crying. Emily holding my hand like she was afraid I'd disappear again. Mark stood near the window, checking his phone. Recovery wasn't heroic. It wasn't inspiring. It was humiliating. I couldn't sit up without help. Couldn't shower alone. Even coughing felt like my chest would tear open. For the first time since I was a teenager, I needed help to do basic things. The doctors said, at least 6 months before normal activity. Normal. I didn't even know what that meant anymore. At first, my family acted supportive. Too supportive. Linda insisted on doing everything herself. Emily stayed over some nights. Mark came by occasionally, usually in a hurry. But something shifted. Quietly. Slowly. It started with sighs. Heavy sighs when I asked for water. Quick glances at the clock when I needed help walking. Small comments that sounded harmless on the surface. "Dad, you should really try to be more independent. James, you can't expect us to drop everything. You're not the only one with problems." I noticed things going missing. My medications weren't refilled on time. Follow-up appointments were forgotten. My recliner, the only chair comfortable for my chest, was moved because it was in the way. One evening, I overheard Emily in the kitchen talking to Mark. They didn't know I was awake. "We can't keep doing this," she whispered. Mark replied, "I know. This is becoming a lot." A lot. That word stuck with me. A month after my surgery, Mark suggested I stop driving. For safety. He took my car keys. Said it was temporary. It didn't feel temporary. Then came the money talk. "I'll help manage your finances, Dad," Mark said one afternoon, sitting across from me like I was a child. "Just until you're better." I trusted him. I always had. So I signed. A few days later, I noticed my debit card didn't work. Mark said it was a bank issue. Emily said not to stress, it was bad for my heart. Stress. Funny how being treated like you're disposable doesn't count as stress. Linda started sleeping in the guest room. Said my breathing machine was too loud. Said she needed rest. I didn't argue. I didn't argue about anything anymore. Then one afternoon I heard it. The word. I was halfway down the hallway with my walker when I heard Mark's voice from the living room. He was on the phone. I swear, it's like having another child, he said. A pause. Yeah. Dad? Since the surgery. He's basically a burden now. Burden. The hallway felt longer than ever. I stood there, gripping the walker, my chest tight, not from my heart, but from something heavier. Later that night, I asked Linda if that's how they saw me. She didn't answer right away. That silence told me everything. Days passed. Then weeks. Conversations started happening without me. Decisions were made for me. I was talked about like I wasn't in the room. One evening, Emily sat beside my bed and said gently, Dad, have you ever thought about assisted living? Just until you're fully recovered. Assisted living. From my own house. The house I paid for. I looked at her face. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't angry. She was practical. That scared me more than anger ever could. That night I couldn't sleep. The house felt different. Colder. Smaller. Like it no longer belonged to me. I stared at the ceiling and realized something terrifying. I had survived a heart attack. But I was slowly being erased. Not with shouting. Not with violence. With politeness. With concern. With paperwork. And the worst part? They thought they were doing the right thing. That's when I understood something clearly for the first time since my surgery. If I didn't protect myself, no one else would. And while they saw a weak old man recovering from surgery, I was quietly waking up. The strange thing about being called a burden is that no one ever says it to your face. They say it around you. About you. As if you've already stopped existing. After that night, something inside me changed. Not anger, not yet. It was awareness. The kind that hurts more than rage. I started noticing everything. The way conversation stopped when I entered the room. The way my name was replaced with him. The way decisions about my life were made without asking me a single question. Mornings became the hardest. I'd wake up before everyone else, heart pounding, chest sore, staring at the ceiling of a house that suddenly felt rented instead of owned. Linda would already be awake, moving quietly, avoiding eye contact. How did you sleep? She'd ask out of habit. Fine. I'd lie. Because telling the truth felt pointless. Breakfast used to be my favorite time. Coffee, toast, the newspaper spread out on the table. After the surgery, breakfast turned into a reminder of how small my world had become. Emily started meal prepping. For my health. Everything bland. Everything portioned. Everything controlled. Doctor's orders, she'd say, even when the doctor never said half of it. If I reached for something extra, she gently moved my hand away. Dad, don't. That single word started following me everywhere. Don't walk too far. Don't touch that. Don't stress. Don't ask questions. Mark came less often now. When he did, it was always with his phone in his hand and impatience in his eyes. Dad, I've got meetings, he'd say, standing instead of sitting. Or, let's make this quick. Quick. My own son had turned my existence into a time inconvenience. One afternoon, I asked Mark about my bank account. Calmly. Politely. I tried using my card. It didn't work. He didn't even look surprised. Oh yeah, he said, waving his hand. I moved some things around. Just temporary. Moved where? I asked. To a safer account, he replied. Easier for me to manage. For me. That's when I realized I wasn't just a burden anymore. I was a responsibility. And responsibilities get controlled. A few days later, a letter arrived from the bank. Change of address confirmation. Statements redirected. My name still there. But Mark's email, Mark's phone number. I held that envelope for a long time. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront him. But my chest tightened, and fear stopped me. Not fear of them. Fear of becoming what they already believed I was, weak. So I stayed quiet. Silence became my shield. Linda stopped asking me what I wanted for dinner. Emily stopped asking if I felt okay. Mark stopped pretending. One evening, I overheard them again. This time, they weren't whispering. "It's not sustainable," Mark said. "I know," Emily replied. "But what choice do we have?" Linda sighed. "We're doing our best." Doing their best, to get tired of me. Then came the appointment I never agreed to. Emily walked into my room one morning with a folder. "I booked a consultation," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "For what?" I asked. "Assisted living. Just to explore options." Explore options. I felt my chest burn, not pain, but humiliation. "I'm not ready for that," I said. She smiled softly. "Dad, this isn't about what you're ready for. It's about what's realistic." Realistic. A man who built his entire life brick by brick reduced to a realistic problem. The appointment was set for Friday. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. On Thursday afternoon, my neighbor, Frank, stopped by. We'd worked together years ago. Retired, stubborn, sharp-eyed. "You don't look good," he said after 5 minutes. "I had surgery," I replied. "That's not what I mean," he said quietly. I almost told him everything. Almost. Instead, I said, "They think I'm a burden." Frank leaned back in his chair. Studied me. "James," he said, "when people start calling you that, it's because you're inconvenient, not useless." That sentence stayed with me. Friday came. They drove me to the assisted living center like it was a dentist appointment. Bright hallways. Smiling staff. Pamphlets about dignity and care. I felt like I was attending my own eviction. The coordinator spoke kindly. Asked questions about my health, my mobility, my finances. My finances. Mark answered most of them. I watched my life get summarized into checkboxes. When it was over, Emily squeezed my hand. "See? Not so bad." I nodded. But inside, something broke cleanly. That night, back home, I tried to access my email. Password changed. I asked Mark about it. "Oh," he said casually. "We thought it'd be easier if we handled that too." Too. That word again. I wasn't just a burden anymore. I was being erased. I went to bed early. Not because I was tired, but because I couldn't stand being visible anymore. Lying there in the dark, I realized something that made my heart race more than the surgery ever did. They weren't waiting for me to recover. They were waiting for me to disappear quietly. And that's when I made my first real decision since the heart attack. I stopped trusting them. The next morning, while everyone was out, I took my walker and slowly made my way to the garage. In an old toolbox, buried under years of dust, were copies of documents I'd forgotten about. Property papers. Insurance policies. A will, outdated but mine. I held those papers with trembling hands. For the first time since my surgery, I felt something close to control. They thought I was weak. They thought I was dependent. They thought my heart surgery had taken everything from me. They were wrong. It only took my illusions. And as I sat there in the quiet garage, papers spread around me like pieces of my life, I understood one thing clearly. If they had already decided I was a burden, then I had nothing left to lose. The papers stayed hidden under my mattress for 3 days. Every night, I pulled them out slowly, like they might shatter if I moved too fast. I read every page as if I were meeting my own life for the first time. Dates. Signatures. My handwriting from years ago, steady, confident, unquestioning. I used to trust without fear. Now, trust felt dangerous. During the day, I played the role they expected. Quiet. Grateful. Compliant. Dad, did you take your meds? Yes. Dad, don't walk without the walker. I won't. I became very good at agreeing. Because while they believed I was shrinking, something else was happening. I was watching. I noticed Mark had started opening my mail completely. Not even pretending anymore. Emily had my medical portal login. Linda spoke to doctors without me present. My life was no longer mine. It was a shared project. The confrontation came on a Sunday afternoon. We were all in the living room. Football on TV. Linda folding laundry. Emily scrolling on her phone. Mark half listening, half working. I cleared my throat. I want my bank access back, I said. The room went quiet, not shocked quiet, but annoyed quiet. Like a child interrupting adults. Mark sighed first. Dad, we've been over this. No, I said. You've talked. I've listened. Emily looked up. Why are you getting worked up? Stress is bad for your heart. There it was again. My heart, used as a leash. I'm not worked up, I said calmly. I'm asking for access to my own money. Mark rubbed his forehead. You're not thinking clearly. That sentence hit harder than any insult. I survived open-heart surgery, I said. I think clearly enough to know what's mine. Linda finally spoke. Her voice was tired, not angry. James, you need to understand, this situation is hard on everyone. Everyone. Not me. Not the man whose chest had been cut open. This situation? I asked quietly. You mean me? No one answered. Emily stood up. Dad, don't do this. Do what? Make things difficult. Difficult. I looked at my daughter, this grown woman I once held while she slept on my chest, listening to my heartbeat. I realized something then. They didn't see a father anymore. They saw a problem that talked back. Mark stood up too. His tone changed. Firmer. Colder. Listen, he said. You can't live alone anymore. You need help. And whether you like it or not, that means we make decisions. That was it. The moment the line was crossed. I didn't ask to stop living alone, I said. Well, he replied, life doesn't always give you a choice. I laughed. Not loud. Not bitter. Just once. You're right, I said. It doesn't. That night, I packed a small bag. No announcement. No drama. I waited until everyone was asleep, then wrote a note in careful handwriting. I need space. I'll be fine. Frank picked me up before sunrise. He didn't ask questions. Just nodded when he saw my bag. Good, he said. Took you long enough. I stayed with him for a week. That week saved my life more than the surgery did. Frank didn't hover. Didn't lecture. Didn't control. He asked once a day how I was feeling, and listened to the answer. I slept deeply for the first time in months. On the fourth day, I called my cardiologist myself. Booked my follow-up. Arranged my prescriptions. Walked slowly into a pharmacy and felt like a human being again. On the sixth day, I made the call that changed everything. A lawyer. Old school voice. Calm. No pity. I think my family is trying to take control of my assets, I said. He paused. Are you of sound mind? I am. Then we need to move quickly. The words felt powerful. Move quickly. I didn't tell my family where I was. But they found out anyway. Linda showed up at Frank's house unannounced. She looked exhausted. Not worried, offended. You scared us, she said. I needed space, I replied. Emily stood behind her. Arms crossed. You can't just disappear like that. I looked at my daughter. You disappeared while I was still in the room. Mark didn't come. That told me everything. Linda tried one last time. James, she said softly, you have to understand, you can't expect things to go back to how they were. She was right. And for the first time, that didn't hurt. You're right, I said. They won't. That night, back at Frank's, I signed new documents. Power of attorney, revoked. Bank access, restored. A new will, drafted. Every signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. They called me a burden after my heart surgery. What they didn't realize was that surgery didn't make me weak. It showed me exactly who thought I was. And once you see that, you stop begging to be loved. You start preparing to be free. I didn't rush back home. That was the first thing they didn't expect. For years, I'd been predictable, reliable, always available. Even after the surgery, they assumed I'd eventually come crawling back, apologetic, grateful, manageable. Instead, I stayed gone. Frank let me use his spare room, but more importantly, he let me think. Every morning, we drank coffee in silence. No advice unless I asked. No pity. Just respect. Strength doesn't always come back as muscle. Sometimes it comes back as clarity. The lawyer worked fast. Too fast for my family to keep up. Within days, Mark lost access to my accounts. Notifications hit his phone before he even understood what was happening. Emily's login to my medical portal stopped working. Linda's authority to speak for me, gone. I imagined the confusion. The sudden loss of control. They had grown comfortable managing me. Now they were locked out. Mark called first. Dad, what the hell is going on? I'm reorganizing my life, I said calmly. You didn't have to do it like this. I did, I replied. He didn't yell. That surprised me. Instead, his voice softened. Too softened. We were just trying to help. Help. Funny how help always looks like control when it isn't asked for. I'm capable, I said. There was a pause. For now, he replied. That told me everything. Emily tried next. She sent long messages. Emotional ones. Reminding me of memories. Of holidays. Of how much she loved me. None of them mentioned my money. None of them mentioned my autonomy. Linda waited longer. When she finally came to see me, she brought paperwork. Medical bills. Insurance forms. A stack placed neatly on Frank's kitchen table like an offering. I don't understand why you're doing this, she said quietly. I'm surviving, I replied. She looked at me for a long moment. You've changed, she said. No, I answered. I stopped disappearing. That night, I went back to my house for the first time. Not to stay. To observe. The door opened easily. Still my key. Still my home. But it didn't feel like it. My chair was gone. My photos, rearranged. My space, reclaimed by others. I walked slowly through each room, noticing what had been packed away, what had been replaced. They had already begun moving on. Good. Because so had I. The next week, the lawyer finalized something important. A trust. My assets, placed beyond impulsive reach. Conditions attached. Clear ones? No control without consent. No inheritance without respect. I didn't feel vengeful signing those papers. I felt calm. Mark found out when the bank refused his request. He showed up at Frank's furious this time. You embarrassed us, he snapped. You tried to erase me, I replied. He laughed, sharp and short. You think this makes you powerful? I leaned forward, chest steady, voice level. No. It makes me protected. That was when fear entered his eyes. Emily came later, alone. She cried. Real tears. I believe they were real. I didn't mean for things to go this far, she said. I know, I replied. That's why they did. She didn't understand. People rarely do, until consequences arrive. Linda stopped calling. That hurt more than I expected. But pain, I learned, doesn't always mean you're wrong. Sometimes it means you finally stopped lying to yourself. Weeks passed. My strength improved. My walks got longer. My heart steadied, not just physically. Then came the invitation. A family meeting. Neutral location. Lawyer present. They wanted to clear the air. I agreed. Not because I needed closure, but because they needed to see me standing. When I walked into that room, Mark froze. Emily stared. Linda looked away. They expected weakness. They got resolve. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply explained. My boundaries. My decisions. My future. When I finished, the room was silent. Finally, Mark spoke. So, what happens to us? That was the question they'd been avoiding. I met his eyes. That, I said, depends on how you treat me when I no longer need you. For the first time since my surgery, the power balance was clear. They called me a burden. Now they weren't sure where they stood without me. And that uncertainty? It was only the beginning. The meeting ended without shouting. That surprised all of us. No slammed doors. No accusations thrown like knives. Just a long, uncomfortable silence that followed my last sentence. I watched their faces. Not to judge, but to understand. Mark looked unsettled. Not angry. Not relieved. Just unsure of where he stood for the first time in his life. Emily stared at her hands, twisting her fingers the way she used to when she was a child, and felt guilty. Linda avoided my eyes completely. That told me everything I needed to know. I left the room without asking for anything. No apologies. No promises. No explanations. For years I had explained myself. I was done. Recovery doesn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like distance. I didn't return to the house right away. Instead, I rented a small apartment not far from the park. 1 bedroom. 1 chair by the window. Quiet. Perfect. Every morning, I walked slowly under the trees, feeling my heart work, not struggle, just work. Honest effort. No one hovering. No one monitoring. No one deciding what I could or couldn't handle. Independence is a strange thing. You don't realize how much you miss it until it's taken from you under the disguise of love. Mark called a week later. Dad? I just wanted to check in. His voice was careful now. Measured. I'm fine, I said. A pause. Are you coming back home? Home. I already am, I replied. He didn't understand that answer. Emily visited next. She brought soup, like she used to when I was sick as a child. We sat at the small table. She talked. I listened. I was scared, she said finally. After the surgery. I didn't want to lose you. I know, I replied. But fear doesn't give anyone the right to take someone's life away. She cried then. Quietly. I didn't comfort her. Not because I didn't love her, but because sometimes love has to stop rescuing people from the consequences of their choices. Linda never visited. That was the hardest truth to accept. Some relationships don't break loudly. They fade when one person stops shrinking. Months passed. My health stabilized. My routine solidified. My peace returned. The lawyer finalized the trust. Everything was in place. Clear, fair, unbreakable. Then, one afternoon, I received a message from Mark. He wanted to talk. Alone. We met at a cafe. Public. Neutral. He looked older. Tired. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it, he admitted. With what? I asked. Choosing yourself? That word again. Burden. I sipped my coffee. You taught me to be strong, he said. I just didn't think you'd use it against us. I didn't, I replied. I used it for myself. He nodded slowly. Is there any way back? I considered the question carefully. There's a way forward, I said. But it's slower. And it doesn't revolve around my money. That was the moment he understood. True reconciliation would cost him something. Pride. Control. Time. We parted without hugging. That felt honest. On the anniversary of my surgery, I went back to the house one last time. Not to reclaim it, but to release it. I stood in the doorway, chest steady, heart strong. That man who collapsed on the kitchen floor a year ago? He didn't exist anymore. I wasn't angry at him. I was grateful. Because pain has a way of revealing truth. They called me a burden after my heart surgery. What they never understood was this. A burden is something you carry. I carried them my whole life. And when I finally set that weight down, I stood taller than I ever had before. If you're listening to this and you've been made to feel like a burden after giving everything, know this. Your worth doesn't disappear when you need help. It disappears only when you let others decide who you are. And you don't have to do that. Not anymore.